One question that I don't quite understand is, why is debt taken into account when we factor GDP? Is it because we're essentially bringing new money online when we make those loans?
Essentially, yes. You're leveraging your ability to consume stuff or invest in stuff. Now, at an economic level, you might argue, well, you're taking it from one person for another, but there's interest payments. There's a whole bunch of mechanisms. But really, if you see the Chinese economy, and what happened is they did the same. They had population coming in, productivity probably rising, but then they massively borrowed money. So they had the fastest growing economy in the world for a long period of time. Leverage gives the illusion of growth, but obviously it has a payback later. And this is the payback we've got now. The leverage that the baby boomers took on, their governments took on, and the corporations took on for all of this issue is what we're dealing with now. So wages didn't go up, assets went up because they were competing for them, like you're competing for scarce resources of people right now. But when you put 76 million people in, the housing market goes up, the stock market goes up because they start pension plans and stuff like that. So the difference is debt, and that was okay. Although we were all starting to look at this saying, whoa, this is now getting absurdly debt-laden. The government's 100% of debt, the private sector's 100% of debt, households are 100% of GDP in debt. It's like, whoa, this is out of control. Then 2008 comes along, and that is the debt crisis. I mean, every fucking bank blew up. I mean, everything blew up. It was a complete, total collapse, and that rolled on into Europe in 2012 when the governments, Spain, Italy, etc., blew up, and all the banks in Europe blew up.
I think this is where you and I begin to diverge. So when I look at 2008, it feels like we just kicked the can. And the thing that I'm worried about is that you can only kick the can for so long. And at some point, you're going to run out of ability to glide, and you do hit the ground.
Well, let's go through this because this is an important point. My view is 2008 was the uncovering that the geyser is not a geyser, it's a volcano. They see it, and it's like the holy shit moment. So they did something unparalleled. The Great Reset happened. They reset all interest rates to zero. I had not realized this until recently. That was the debt jubilee. We will reset all payments to zero because we understand. And then Europe kind of forced the car. 2012, it was then okay. There's no way around this. So the blow up happens, but it's now disguised. And the disguise is the important next part of the story. Because what they did is somewhere around 2012, I believe, G7 made the agreement, learnt from the Japanese, which is...
G7 are the 7 biggest
nations in the
banks?
world. Nations in the world.
Okay. Nothing to do with their central banks at this point.
No, but it's the finance ministers who get together. But there's a realization, and I think the Japanese realized it first. When your government debt is 100% of GDP, this is the really important point of the Everything Code. When your government debt is 100% of GDP, and your private sector debt is, for easy maths, call it 100% of GDP in debt. Okay, now interest rates, let's say they're 2% for easy numbers. So when the government has to pay, well, economic growth is what pays for debt, right? It's the earnings of the economy. So if economic growth is growing at 2% and interest rates are at 2%, then the government, which is 100% of GDP in debt, uses all economic growth to pay the interest. So then the private sector has got to pay its 2%. And that means the economy would contract, and this would continue in perpetuity.